Well, I don't know. What do you think of that tune?
It was good. It was relaxing. Yeah, loved it.
I, I'm not really great at the whole music thing, so I've been screwing around with these background music things, and I even uploaded some because I can find royalty free
Oh,
music and all that. But the problem is, have you? I don't know what I did wrong. I mean, you're at the Googles, so maybe you can like find out for me. But I did something where now every other suggestion, maybe it's just this channel. This channel, this is a new. I started this channel in the middle of January, right? So I'm
mhm.
like, um, what are we now? Like 6, 8 weeks. Let's call it 7 weeks. I don't know, something like that, right? We're not too far into the journey already, and so what I wanted to do was to like keep this as pristine as possible. But every now and then, by accident, because I have my private account which I use for like spam, and I have like this channel which is my public like YouTube channel. Every now and then, by accident, I'll be logged in on YouTube and I'll look for stuff. Um, and usually, the stuff I look for is like code or the occasional you know Daily Show or whatever, or Last Week Tonight, that kind of stuff, right? I'm a pretty boring person, and so I don't know what signals I've given the Google brain, but now every other video every other short is that Patrick Lou Toubon friendships song along with people moonwalking,
Oh,
right? And it's a really kind of catchy song, but I want it to go away because I can't think. And like every time I hear one of these opening songs, I wish I could have that, but of course I don't have enough money to license that.
that's
So
unfortunate. Yeah, no, I know the experience. You get your algorithm just gets a little bit off, and you get the chocolate in your peanut butter, and there's no way to unmix them. You just have to burn it all down. It's
burn it down from space. Actually, that's the other thing. Did you ever listen to that Tay Zonde song, Chocolate
chocolate
Rain?
rain. Yeah,
Yeah, get that out of your ears. I dare you. Like it was
true.
years,
Year
years,
long
and like
decade. Yeah.
wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweat. Gotta listen to that song. It's the worst. It's so good. Okay, well we did it. We're here. So Richard, can you tell people who you are and stuff like that?
Sure. I'm Aaron Wanjala. I am a Java developer advocate here at Google Cloud, and that has been an amazing experience. It basically means that I sit between the Java community and Google Cloud, um, hopefully making it easier and more approachable to use our products with Java, and then also bringing back your feedback, crucially, to the product teams that are building the tools you're using, so they're building the right things you actually want to see. So if you have feedback on, I was just on the Golden Path for Spring one,
Right.
um, and I've been, I'm around. I'll go and talk at different conferences, and if you ever have anything that you want to tell a product team about your experience using Java Google Cloud, my DMs are open. I'm on Twitter. Please reach out. I'd love to hear it.
Nice. That's awesome. Wait. Oh, you got it right there in your name. That's smart. Most people don't do. At Aaron M.W.
Yep.
Like
Yep. I can't.
W.
W. I can't take credit for that. I was given the advice to do it by the facilitator of the last session, your last VMware session. So yeah,
Sean?
it was no Flora.
Cora.
Flora.
Flora.
Yeah.
Oh. Wait, so what happened? So when you went onto that session, they said you should put your Twitter handle there?
Yeah. They suggested it, and I said, yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, that is a good idea.
Yeah.
I should totally I'm gonna steal that and not tell anybody that you taught me it. Just gonna take it down.
Perfect.
Hey, that's great. No, so thank you for joining us. I know you're, like you just said, you're busy, and this is very short notice for people who don't know. We were talking about this for a minute, but it all came together very, very quickly in the last couple of days. So really appreciate you taking the time. I'm just really glad you're here as well, because this is I'm crossing the streams, right? We're gonna do this on YouTube. I hope people will find it there and they'll love it. But and I also have the Bootiful podcast, right? And I want people to be able to hear this. And I think there's still an amazing opportunity for people who just want to use one of their senses and not both of them, right?
Right.
In podcast field. So, hopefully this will. Hopefully we can talk about some really cool stuff related to Google and Spring today. And that's I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I'm a big podcast fan, so if you're a podcast listener, welcome. I've been thinking about featuring on more podcasts or having my own podcast, so this is a good introduction. Yeah,
you've got the brain and the voice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
totally do it. Yeah, people keep complaining to me that my audio sounds terrible in my podcast. I don't. It's my voice. My voice sounds. I don't know how to fix it. It sounds exactly like my voice, and it's been years. I mean, sometimes I use those like cheap old. Remember when the AirPods had the cable?
Yeah. Just like the iPod headphones. I don't know what they call them. Yeah.
Yeah, those, and that would cause. And I got that. I'm not supposed to use that, but now I've got like this fancy schmancy you can't even see it, but it's in what is it, Snowball or whatever, right? Blue
pop filter and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm trying here, people. It's just I can't fix it. There's no way to make this better. So, unless maybe I paid you to say my lines.
Well, it sounds good to me. It sounds like your audio setup is good. I don't think you have any problem.
Yeah, good. Okay, so look, you're at Google. One of the things that's interesting here is that Spring. So we have Spring Framework, which is the core thing, and then there are frameworks atop that, and then there's Spring Boot, which sort of pulls a lot of these things together in an opinionated, auto-configured style. And I think a lot of people have gotten into the ecosystem because they started working with either Spring or they started working with Spring Boot. And so, like, first of all, you're good. Your audio setup. Hey, your check's in the mail. See, that person thinks my audio's okay.
Yeah, there we go.
You and me are the only ones who agree on this. Everybody else, I get complaints. It's the number one complaint for my YouTube videos, for my podcast, whatever. Anyway, I think a lot of people have gotten into the community. You were saying before that you were using Spring Boot. When did you start using it? Like, what's your experience there?
Yeah, no, for me, it was around 2014, 2015. I was working for a startup doing identity management software for the government here in Canada. And similarly, like around the same time, I started doing, I was with them for about 3 years. And I also did about 3 years designing microservices, like doing app modernization for a bank. So I had some financial experience, had some identity management experience, all on Spring Boot. It's been the majority of my career as a dev, actually. And it's been a great experience.
That's amazing. So was your background in Java, and then you just sort of naturally moved into the Spring stuff, or were you using some other language before? Or?
I actually started as just a full stack web dev. So my first project was on PHP, and then it was actually the LAMP stack. It was a great project, involved deployment on Raspberry Pis. You mentioned PHP earlier. There's some things I like about it, but I've had much more experience in the Java land. So Java and Angular are my bread and butter, and I've had a great experience with like the amount of the amount of work that the auto configuration saves us. Like the opinionated architecture of Spring. Really respect that. That's also what I like about Angular, and that's really informed my like preferences as a developer in other areas.
Yeah, I mean the auto. Well, okay, so I wanted to. I can't leave the PHP thing. You were on LAMP. You were doing LAMP. That's awesome.
Yep.
So you were doing like Linux, Apache, MySQL, and that used to be Perl, and then it became just PHP. Like that's the only thing that you would consider today, right?
Yeah. It was a good time. I really liked it was a good experience because it gave me the ability to try kind of every part of the deployment stack, a bit of the what you'd now call like the ops side, or like the the provisioning, and it was also, it needed to be deployed on like 35 Raspberry Pi, so it was a bit of an imaging exercise too, and like scripting, and that was a great experience. But yes, no, especially with the larger projects, luckily that was a very small team, so the PHP burden was very manageable. But then when you get to larger projects, there's kind of no comparison with like the amount of undifferentiated complexity that an opinionated architecture can answer for you by just saying this is the way you should do it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, there's like Laravel and there are some
Cake,
opinionated
Slim.
approaches to PHP these days. But when you but I guess what I was trying to get at, did you know Java before you did the PHP stuff, or did you learn PHP first and then do the Java? Because I always think people coming from PHP to Java are going to be in a good place if they're learning modern PHP, right? Like PHP in the last 10 years as opposed to PHP 3, which is the one I learned.
Right. I think it was maybe 6 for me, or 5. But I was learning Java before I worked in PHP. PHP was the first language that I worked in, the first backend language I worked in, and then, but I did learn Java first, and then now I have much more professional experience on Java than PHP. But I've also worked in a couple other frameworks like with Cake and Slim PHP.
Yeah.
And there's definitely like merits to those. I can see what people use.
Today, people who know me know that I just have a very hard time taking PHP very seriously. But it's mostly because it's self-loathing, right? Like I've always figured, like if you can stand the verbosity of Java, then you're already like in the minority, right? People want a more abbreviated, concise language, and I think there's actually a lot of great choices out there, of which PHP is not one. It's the only language I can think that's actually more verbose than Java, which is super hard to do, right? You have to remove characters to get from PHP code to Java code, right? If you think about
I definitely see where you're coming from, and some of the syntax is a little obtuse when you're doing like complex like object accessing. But I can definitely there are some there are some great PHP teams here at Google who taught me some interesting things about it. And I definitely like the verbosity of Java, actually. Like especially when you're doing something like you're writing like a reactive service, and you're writing a service that uses like async requests. You want to like that verbosity becomes like being really explicit about what you're doing, and then it becomes clarity. It's like it slows you down on simple things, but when you're working on complicated things, the verbosity becomes being really explicit about what you want, and it saves you time. So that's what I tell people. Have I tried Kotlin? I have. I've tried a little bit of Kotlin. James Ward has shown me a lot of Kotlin. I haven't put Kotlin in production, but I like how like brief it is. And I think, I could see a lot more of the JVM code base out there in the world sliding towards Kotlin in the future. If I was to make a vague prediction, I think that's a likely endpoint.
For me, what I love is when you hit period and hit control space or command space or whatever. I don't even know what it is, and I just do it so often by memory. I think it's control space still on the Mac. But that is the list of things that I get after that going to be useful. And for Java and for Kotlin, because they're both JVM languages, it probably will be. You've got this nice thing. Okay, so great. So then you moved into the Java ecosystem, and there, again, a lot of frameworks. I think there's a lot of the use cases for which Java is mostly known, or at least at that time, circa 2008, for example, before Android. The use cases for which Java was most widely known were server side, right? And so PHP and Java have that in their history, right? And then you move to the ecosystem, and this is kind of interesting. Had you tried something like a Rails or something like that?
Nope, never worked with Rails. It really was mostly just like almost all of my career has been Spring Boot and Angular. Yeah.
Nice. And Angular is quite. Do you use so Angular I like because it has like dependency injection and all that stuff, and it made sense to me. But then I learned it, and then everybody else moved away. I'm like, oh, come on.
So did you learn Angular JS?
I learned Angular.js, the very first one, and then I learned Angular 2. But by that point, everybody was talking about React and Vue, and I'm not smart enough to do React, so I did I did Vue. It kind of felt like Angular.js, the very first one. Are you? Wait a minute. I don't know if this is. Can I ask a stupid question?
Sure.
This is a question here. Are you Kenyan?
So yes, I am Kenyan. I was born here in Canada, but everybody else in my family is born in Kenya. So habari mzuri. Thank you. It's good to see another Kenyan. I think there was another Kenyan in the session that I did earlier in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool. That's very, very cool. Okay, so I guess okay. So Spring Boot, what were you doing with the Spring stuff when you first got into it? I'm just kind of like, because remember, 2014 is 9 years ago, and Spring Boot
It's a
came
lot.
out almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like there's been so what I was doing was mostly financial software, identity management software, and I think the experience on Spring has gotten better in that time. Like I think I have personally switched from when I'm hacking on a project on my own, I switched from going to Node first to going to Spring first because
Oh,
now it's so much easier to get something like a Spring Cloud Function off the ground
right.
with so much less configuration. And earlier on, like at the start of my career, I saw Spring as very useful when I needed like a lot of predictability and performance. So if I'm
Yeah.
building like um, the like security annotations to make sure that like an app at the bank can only be accessed by somebody who has all the right permissions according to all of our
Right.
internal systems, then great. I'm happy to set up all the Spring machinery and get it all working because it saved me
Right.
time. But then when I was just doing my own personal project, didn't make sense for me to do that. Now it's become so much easier that there's no gap for me. When I'm picking up a new project, I'll just start up a Spring Cloud Function and I'm
Right.
off to the races. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. And plus, now you can unwind the stack. So the reason I brought up Rails earlier is because with Rails, it was purpose built for like, hey, I want to build a web app babysitting a database, right? And it would just code generate these reams of code, and yeah, it worked. You could build a web app babysitting a database with aplomb, with ease, with speed that could be scarcely imagined, let alone rivaled in most other languages.
Mm-hmm.
But it only fell apart when you tried to do anything else, right? Like if you wanted to build, REST endpoint, then yeah, tough. Or if you wanted to build a web app with a different kind of view templating language than was supported out of the box, then tough. Or if you wanted to use a different database type that wasn't supported, tough. And so Spring Boot kind of like it's got that sense of strong opinions loosely held, right?
Yeah, I really wish that I had more, especially now that I'm doing a lot of I've been doing app modernization work for a decent chunk of my career, but now I'm doing a lot more advising on app modernization, and I don't have the experience to pull from like the older like pre-Spring Boot days because
Good.
almost all of my time has been spent on Spring Boot. But I've had a great time being a little bit of like an internet archaeologist and looking through the GitHub issues that requested the creation of Spring Boot and
Yeah.
looking through the experience of what it was like to work without it. So love hearing that. Yeah.
It definitely it wasn't bad. I mean, did you ever see the Spring Triangle? So we used to talk about the Spring Triangle, and there was three sides to it, obviously, because it's a triangle. And there's aspect-oriented programming, dependency injection, and portable service abstractions, which are like libraries, And so, and that was a Spring framework triangle, And people today they don't know, like times were simpler back then. You could tell a whole story with just a triangle. Now it's got to be like animated and have a meme attached to it and all that stuff. But anyway, like with Spring Boot, we have that extra dimension of like auto configuration. And so for the people that were like you talking about those large enterprise apps, Spring was just fine because you could do it. You could do things that just weren't possible, right? With the distinguished competition, brand X, whatever that is, albeit at the cost of complexity. And then here comes Spring Boot. It's like, well, you can have the opinionated defaults for the 80% cases, but if you want to override and diverge in some way, you can, because you can swap out parts of the machine,
Right. Yeah. And it really becomes clear when you have an organization that's big enough for you to write a starter or write something that can really be reused and make engineering easier across the board, then you see the value. And it's
you're talking my language. You are. It's clear you've been doing this for a minute. That's so cool. I love it. Okay, so now Spring Boot is entrenched, I think, and then people wanted to use it to connect their applications and to better integrate in sort of idiomatic Spring ways with the cloud.
yes.
And so we created there's two sides to that. One is I want to write apps that take advantage of the patterns that people have for building cloud apps, Like you mentioned, Spring Cloud Function, that would be a great way to build a serverless function as a service-centric application. And then the other side is I want to connect to those resources managed by and provided by the cloud platform, right? So things like, Spanner, right? Google Cloud Spanner is a masterpiece, a piece of magic, a modern marvel of modern engineering. And so we had Spring Cloud, and then we have these Spring Cloud X, variations, these little offshoots that take Spring Cloud, which has those common patterns, and then reinforce them with the sort of platform-specific support, right? And so we have Spring Cloud for the other clouds, and to my endless joy and pleasure, there's also support for GCP, Google Cloud Platform, right?
Yes.
What is the right way to call that framework these days?
So actually, it's come through a recent rebranding. So it used to be Spring Cloud GCP, but now it is Spring Framework on Google Cloud, and
okay,
so that's a recent change. It's I believe it's only the last few weeks or month, and it also comes with an announcement of a new major version. So Spring Cloud GCP 4.0 is out. I actually just recently wrote a blog post about that. I can share that in the chat actually. And what I did to kind of commemorate the event and kick the tires, because that's part of the job as well as a Java developer advocate. I'm trying to act like I work with these product teams, the ones that are designing these client libraries, to make it easier to use Java on Google Cloud.
right.
And I kind of act like developer number 0. So when they want to make a release, they say, how does this look? Can you give it a try? Can you give us any issues that you run into? And so I took this on a test drive by going to one of our flagship sample apps, Bank of Anthos, which is a polyglot banking app example.
Right.
So it's a little bit of Python, a little bit of Java, and it uses the Spring Framework on Google Cloud client libraries. And I said, let me take this from Spring Boot 2 to 3. Let me take it from Spring Cloud version or Spring Framework on Google Cloud version 3 to 4, and document the experience, try out the migration guide, and blog about it. So that's what I did. It was a lot of fun.
So you migrated the Bank of Anthos application just for the blog?
Just for the blog. And then I linked to the commits in there to see this is what I did, this is the changes that were required. And the team moved so fast that one of the issues that I called out in the blog post was fixed before the blog went live. So I ended up not having as much to call out as pointers because the team just fixed it too quick.
Good problem to have.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, oh wow, I've got the blog up in front of me here. It doesn't look like, it's just, a lot of this seems to be the stuff that you have to work with when you move from boot 2.0 to 3.0, for example.
That is quite a bit of it. Yeah, really, the major change for this new major version of this client library is that Java 17 is required. Yes. But also there's a new set of previews, which I don't know if you've heard of.
No.
They're essentially starters that are custom built for each Google Cloud client library. And so I mentioned them in the middle of the blog there. And if you want to start working with, say, the Cloud Speech-to-Text API, and you've never used it before, there's now a simple starter that you can pull down and uses a starting point.
Oh, is it like a snapshot? Is it just not GA yet?
It is in preview, but
okay.
They're also, yeah.
Oh wow! So you're providing. So is that to say that there are now a lot more starters, or Spring Boot starters, but a lot of them have been marked as preview, so people know to use them with a little bit of caution?
So yeah, they are more like reference examples for you to get started with a new client library or new API. They're not intended for you to put into production, but they should be helpful guides for absolutely every client library that you may use on Google Cloud. There's over 80 of them. And the team worked. Yeah, I'm super impressed by the volume of work that this team can get done.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna read to the audience here because we're on a podcast, and So okay, let's see here. I don't even know what if I'm honest, I don't know what a lot of these are, but they look pretty cool. You've got support for the Java workflows. Is there a workflow engine in Google Cloud I should be aware of?
Yeah, Java workflows. I think that's there are a number of ways to do like sort of event-driven architectures. So this one's for cloud workflows, and so
Okay.
that's like that's for like process automation. I think it's for ML mostly applications as well.
Let me see. Retail, Java Scheduler, Redis, reCAPTCHA Enterprise, OS config. I assume that's operating system login and config. I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
What is Java orchestration Airflow? Oh, that's Airflow, Apache Airflow, like for data pipelines, I guess. Is that it?
I think you're right.
IAM, admin, IAM credentials, IDs, IoT. That sounds interesting. Java language, G Suite, GKE Hub. What's that one do?
GKE Hub. Good question.
I
don't think I've worked with this one before, actually.
I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. You're right. There's like I just clicked on GKE Hub, and you know what? The README seems nice. It's got colorful fonts and links and some very clear things you can do with this. Wow, that's amazing.
This one appears to be for Anthos clusters, which, speaking about modernization, that would be a helpful starter.
Okay, we should talk about that actually in a second here. Let me see, DLP, deploy, data stream, debugger, data catalog, container. So these are these, is there Spanner in here? There must be, right? Spanner.
I believe Spanner's there. DLP is another very cool one. That's a fun one to demo. Yeah.
Spanner in here. Is that a different project maybe?
It may just be because Spanner has its own. I think this was mostly a gap filling exercise to make sure that absolutely everything has its own starters. So Spanner may have been over the threshold of already having bespoke starters for it.
Okay, that's amazing. So this is just actually this is everything. This is like if you can't find it out there, then come here and find it in this list. But either way, there's one-for-one support for Spring developers who want to consume Google Cloud infrastructure. This is amazing. I mean, I can't believe all this stuff is just. Was this all here before in the last version? I don't remember this being here.
I believe this is all new. Yeah, and it's just talk about a major version. It's a lot of added value, a lot of added content, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And they also the team also produced a migration guide, which, speaking of, we mentioned the Angular upgrade process between JS and 2. I think that is one of the, like, at least in my career, one of the most impactful migration processes across any language or framework.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people inside of Google have learned like valuable lessons about writing migration content since then. And this is a good example of like a really well written, really well approached migration guide. It was really helpful for me. It really didn't take much for me it called out a lot of the known issues and got me off the ground very quickly.
This is, wow. Okay. So let's talk about Google Cloud. I just want to like plug it. This is the link you just sent me. I've got that on the screen for people here, but it's the link announcing Spring. It's announcing Spring Framework for Google Cloud, or
yes,
whatever it's called these days. Yeah, that's cool. That is super cool. So Spring, so Google Cloud, lots of infrastructure. You've got world-class offerings, like I mentioned, Google Cloud Spanner, which is,
incredible.
Yeah, incredible. You can't run it in your data center, nor could you, even if you could, right? Like you have to be Google to be able to do what they're doing with that kind of stuff. Yeah. You've got the usual suspects. You've got a Kubernetes distribution called GKE, which is quite nice. What is Anthos?
Anthos is a product specifically designed for enterprise customers who want to take an existing application and just lift and shift it over into the cloud. And so provides a set of tools to make that easier, to allow you to power it with either GKE or Google Compute Environment. So there's Anthos on bare metal, which would be you just get VMs and you make sure that they run exactly as you would have in your own data center, but in ours. And then there's Anthos on GKE, which is more of like a middle step to being more of a cloud native architecture. And so it's a very specially designed on-ramp for enterprise customers who have large, complex apps that they want to migrate over to the cloud.
Oh, cool. I like that. Yeah. That sounds cool. And then you've got Google Cloud Run, which is Awesome, right? That's how would you describe that?
Cloud Run
Container-
is it's our container based endpoint, or our container based deployment service, where anything you can put into a container, it will be served according to Cloud Run's contract, and so you don't have to do you don't have to do a lot of the things that you would normally be adopting if you were getting into the container orchestration game with Kubernetes. You just kind of say, here's my container, here's how I want you to serve it. And it does it provides a whole bunch of monitoring and deployment options and integrates really nicely with Cloud Build. And a specific tip for the Java community is that if you are building, Cloud Run supports building from source for a number of languages. Java, Python, Node, there's a few others, Go. And so you don't even have to build your container necessarily. If you're one of these, and there are many of us, like many Java shops don't really want to or have their arms around containerizing every Java app quite yet. And so this is one option that uses build packs behind the scenes, like many other cloud platforms do. So you can just basically go into your source directory and run gcloud run deploy, and it will package your Java app and run it as a container, or build a container for it and then run it on Cloud Run.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. And is that Knative underneath the hood? I think it used to be.
So it's a cousin of Knative. It's slightly forked from Knative. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love this. So you've got, like, it sounds like you've really Google Cloud has been very thoughtful about thinking about all the different ways that people want to get their workloads into managed infrastructure, right? And so it's a reasonable choice for people to want to get there. And once you get there, I think your apps, you could write your apps to still use the old world technologies, right? You can run MySQL on Google Cloud just as well as anywhere else. But there's some things that are unique to Google Cloud, and it shouldn't be an impediment to consume those, right? And so I think this is where Spring Framework on Google Cloud. Did I get there?
On Google Cloud, yeah, absolutely, you nailed it. No, absolutely. It's been great since joining. I was I hadn't worked professionally on Google Cloud before joining Google, but I had launched 3 personal apps on Google Cloud before. Nice. And so I was a fan of Google Cloud. I was a fan of the offerings. But being able to be in here and speak to the product teams and just soak up all of the, like, as you were saying, like the thoughtful ways that the platform is built over the last year and 8 months has been great. And it's not obvious where you should run your stuff all the time. And so I want to shout out the work from one of my fellow advocates, Priyanka Vergadia, which is like a great, like, disambiguation post on where you should run your stuff. And essentially, she points out that if you want more or less control, that's one axis. Or if you have more or less operations chops within your team, that's another axis. And it's a very helpful guide. I've sent this to so many people. When you're trying to decide which compute option is the right one for you and your project and your team.
It even has a picture.
And she draws those herself. She's a very talented artist. Yeah.
This is awesome. Wow, look at that. Yeah, it's pretty. I could print this out. Like, that would be, I mean, the whole article I could print out. It's got a cool picture, very short and pithy. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. See, this is invaluable. See, this is nice. I like this. I come from, for me, I like the opinionated, automated approach. Hello to Nurula. I hope I didn't butcher that, but hello to you. Good afternoon from San Francisco and from
Canada. Yeah.
So yeah, I love that opinionated approach. So me, I'm all about that. Like, give me Knative or something like it. Give me something like, we have an opinionated approach on top of Kubernetes as well. So there's like, give me something like that. I appreciate that not everybody's there, and you and I are lucky. We can launch green today and start with Kubernetes in mind, right? Or start with something like a container centric platform in mind. But it's not everybody. It's just definitely.
That is a luxury. Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Way well put, sir. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Okay, so you've got this incredible suite of stuff. It's using Spring Boot 3. What were the issues that you had? Like, can you talk about what pain you felt migrating the libraries to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So really this is another thing where a really well-maintained project makes this very easy. So Bank of Anthos was already, it is like a larger, it's in production, it's a real app. But the fact that it was already basically in shape for the Spring Boot 3 migration was a big help. So I basically just had to switch over. It was the state of the Bank of Anthos app made that migration as easy as it could be, which it's not that difficult because of how the Spring team has kind of set things up. But so that was the first hurdle. The second hurdle was making sure that all older references to some things like, I believe it was some templated type that didn't require explicit declaration of the type that you're casting it to. That was one change. And then there was also a Zipkin bug that was the temporary bug where using like the Zipkin auto configuration would cause a crash when you were running some tests. And so I had to exclude it temporarily, but then that was fixed by the team. Everything else was auto configured away and managed by the bomb. So really I just had to upgrade a few dependencies, make a couple syntactic changes, and run the test again, which I detail in the blog.
Does Bank of Anthos use Spring Boot auto configuration itself? Does it provide its own auto configuration?
That's a good question. I don't actually remember.
Or I know that behind the scenes Spring Boot changed from 2 to 3. We changed the way that you do auto configuration. So for that all to have just worked, that means they at least did all that. There's a lot of if you're doing anything on the web tier, anything with validation, that's going to have those types will have moved from Javax to Jakarta dot.
Oh yes, I did have to make those changes actually. I think that I did call that out as well. You moved from Javax to Jakarta. So I guess it wouldn't have then if I had to make those changes myself.
Well, there's nothing we could have done to make that easier for you, right? Like that's your code, unfortunately, and
right. You can't reach across.
Your code's fine. I'm saying, unfortunately, your code was impacted. And that's the Jakarta EE. That's a parallel thread of weirdness on the side there, but for the better. Obviously, it wouldn't be worth doing if it wasn't for the better. So, okay, cool. And this is a big project. I'm looking at the Bank of Anthos Git repository, Google Cloud Platform / it's github.com, Google Cloud Platform, bank-of-anthos, ANTHOS.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's Bank of Anthos is meant to be a real world banking app that's just built. It's like a cloud native banking app. So it's pretty substantial. It has a couple Python services. It has a couple Java services, and it runs in a GKE cluster. And one important thing about that project is that it uses Scaffold. If you go to its local development guide, it suggests you use Scaffold to run your local workflow. And I would highly recommend that to any Kubernetes developer. I've done a lot of Kubernetes work without it. I've run K9s locally, and it works fine as far as in isolation. But where it really broke down for me was reproduction of issues, especially across the whole dev team. And when it came to dev prod divergence, where I get a bug and I'm told this is how it's behaving in prod, and I think I have my configuration right, but I spend an unreasonable amount of time making sure that it is exactly right, so that I can start working on the bug. Whereas Scaffold allows you to automate a lot of that work, and it makes it a lot easier to make sure that everybody's running with almost the exact same setup for your local Kubernetes.
Inner loop.
Yes, big inner loop simplifier. If you wanted to get fancy, you can also use it in your CI/CD pipeline. But the local development guide on Bank of Anthos just says, here's how you set it up locally, this is how we suggest you do it. And for such a reasonably complex, multi-language Kubernetes sample app, it makes it really approachable. So big thumbs up there.
Big thumbs up. Okay, I can't wait to try that out myself. I see. So when you said there's Java, are they using Spring?
They are. Yep. They are.
Oh, go on.
I think there's 3 Spring services.
So you moved to the Spring Boot 3.0. Did you try out the GraalVM stuff?
I didn't try it there, but I had a separate effort to move all of it because it's a polyglot.
Sure.
I wanted to try moving everything over to Graal and seeing if I could get like some sub-second startup times for the whole app.
Right.
And I've had that on my like Fun Friday back burner for a while, but I haven't gotten it all the way through. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me know if I can help. Maybe we could do on the open source stuff, on the Bank of Anthos, whatever. Maybe we could do a pair programming thing on a live stream.
That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me at least. You'd be bored by having somebody slow you down.
No. I think the opposite is pretty likely. I tried, I believe it was CRaC as an optimization on Bank of Anthos,
Right.
and that was fun, but I might have misconfigured it, but I didn't actually get the performance benefits that I was hoping for. So I ended up shelving it, but it was a good experience. I might still blog about it because of how interesting it was to get it configured and running.
You didn't get performance?
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it wasn't like the drastic performance difference that I was thinking, but it's entirely possible that I just misconfigured it. And I'd like to ask somebody about it actually. So I'd like to just compare notes there.
Yeah. So first of all, as you discovered, do you have a Linux box?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have Linux VMs, but I mostly run on a Mac here.
Okay. Well, I think you need to be on an actual like Linux thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I saw a person running actual Linux on a Linux machine, and because it's fidgety, you have to change something in the kernel or whatever. And like it's not. It only works on Linux, right? It's very fidgety. But I saw somebody do a demo with Spring Boot. It was 2 milliseconds, not 20, just 2 straight. Like it was faster than GraalVM. GraalVM, you get like 80 milliseconds, right? 2 milliseconds to take a reasonable basic web app with an actuator and a hello world or whatever, and get it to the point where it's handling traffic. I think it even had a data source, maybe. Like it's insane. It was. So anyway, I dare say maybe you missed a step, and we all do.
It's entirely possible. Yeah, I'd love to figure it out and co-author a blog. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I mean, I'm on a Mac, so I can't do it myself. So I'm the wrong person. But I saw somebody who's far smarter than I am, which is again low bar. But they got it working. I couldn't believe it. He said blink and you'll miss it, and he was generously understating.
Right. That's you can blink. You can 2 milliseconds. There's time for a lot of 2 milliseconds inside of a blink. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The electrons in your brain fire that quickly. I mean, I suppose.
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's crazy. It was so fast, and that was like you saw all the logs and it had printed out, right? Actually, no, you didn't see the logs for the. So remember, so what you do is you run the app for people in the audience who are listening and who haven't tried this yet. What it does is it gives you a mechanism by which you can take a snapshot of your running code, right? And it'll literally copy everything and then write it off to a disk. And the important thing is that there's a callback hook. There's an interface that you can implement, CRaC resource or something like that. I forget what it's called. Coordinated restore and checkpoint, something like that. So there's an interface there that you can implement that will give you a callback when your code is about to be checkpointed, where it's about to be snapshotted. And when it gets snapshotted, you want to turn off, you want to close down the database. You want to close down, any ambient ephemeral state, any transient state that you don't want being saved to disk, because you can't save a data source socket, right? That wouldn't be useful. It should be recreated anew when you hydrate the app. So as long as you make sure to take care of dismantling any transient state, it'll save everything else off to disk, and then it'll just instant on to that state the next time. So you don't see the logs because it's not restarting the app. It's just the app it resumes from where it was when the app was checkpointed, right? It was phenomenal, crazy, and then it was ready to serve traffic. It had a data source, it had all that other stuff. So, hey, we got a great question here, Aaron. Did you see this one? As senior developers, I think he's talking to you. What advice do you have for junior developers?
Yeah, as senior developers, what advice do I have for junior?
You
I would
and me
say
both.
that if you're interested in making the switch from senior to junior, I feel like the best way that I picked up that context the fastest was by really paying attention to review time with senior developers. That's when you get a good sense of like that kind of house style of the place where you're working and what security patterns you need to keep in mind when you're actually writing your code, and the ability to kind of write robust code and kind of see around corners that you're going to be encountering over and over again is a big part of making that switch. And really, as long as you have a collaborative team where you can learn off each other like that, that's the best way that I can offer to become as senior as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. That's a good answer. Okay, so anyway, I got off on that CRaC tangent because I just think that is like
it seemed incredible, and when I read about it, I was so excited about it, and so I was like, I need to implement this, and then I was like, I must be doing something wrong, and so even the end of I have like a document that I've written up. We'll compare notes on this, but
Sure.
at the end, I'm like, I must have missed something because like the performance. I ran a couple tests, and I was like, this seems almost the same. It may actually be the system limitation that you were talking about because I don't think I'd read about that.
I don't know if that's true. It seemed like it was very, very specific to like a thing in the kernel, and it wasn't like maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but I remember VMs for him didn't cut it or whatever. Maybe it can be done. I don't know. I'm just not a VM person, despite working at that company. So, but yeah, phenomenal, crazy performance, and it just goes to show. I mean, it's clearly possible, right? You can use CRaC. The other thing is you have to do that. There's something about setting a PID or setting some sort of permissions, and you got to make sure that the container image that runs the code has
process
access.
One, and it's
that it was fidgety as well.
Yeah, I don't think I had my hands fully around that one, but that was part of for the last year roughly. I've been spending my time getting very familiar with like different app modernization or app optimizations, and writing content about when you should use one versus the other. And CRaC was one of them. I gave it a try. I don't think I fully got there, but a lot of the time that I spent was on native image compilation because I saw in Spring 1, 2021, I saw that you were announcing that Spring Native is going to be brought in. It's going to be brought in from experimental to mainline in the next major version, Spring Boot 3, Spring Boot 6, Spring Boot 3, Spring Firmware 6. And so I thought people are going to need content about this. People are going to need advice on how to get started with it, and not just in general, but like how does this apply to Google Cloud? Why does this matter to me on Google Cloud? And so what Dan Dobrin and I have been doing is writing content about how using native image compilation can improve your organization's cloud economics. It can let you get more done with your existing resources, or you can serve more you can serve more requests, or you can just reduce your bill and reduce your carbon footprint, reduce your impact in general. And so when an organization is looking at a modernization effort in general, it's important to know which optimizations are out there, right? Because something like native image compilation, it's not obvious, and it may not be on the radar of a tech leader if they're just looking at something where they see an old slow service, they're like, I have to rewrite it. You have significant other options that can save you a lot of time, do a little bit of configuration, some reachability configuration, rather than a full rewrite and get tremendous results.
There's even that Java agent that helps with that, but it is not easy. Like you just kind of suggested, it's not free, right? Like if you have anything complicated, there's going to be work to be done. So what about the new release of the Spring framework for Google Cloud? Has there been any work done to see about making those work in the GraalVM native image context?
So not with that major version, but if a bit earlier, there's another announcement blog post that I wrote that was announcing the Spring framework on Google Clouds, like the SDK's native image support out of the box. And so that was maybe 6 months ago that we started offering essentially reachability support for our own libraries so that you don't have to do additional configuration to use Google Cloud Services once you make the switch over from a JVM app to a GraalVM natively compiled app. And that's been great. It is the reason why it was seen as important by this team and for Google Cloud users is because, you know, especially in, like you were talking about with Cloud Run, like serverless contexts, something that's commonly a hurdle is like slow startup times, which can result in cold starts. So if you have a service that's scaled all the way down to 0, reasonably the first request would require a new container to be spun up. And if that's a traditional, you know, it could be a few seconds or longer, but if it's a natively compiled image, then it is really worth the time to spend extra time compiling, extra time configuring to get that sub-second startup when a client is waiting for the request on the other end.
Right. Oh yeah, much less than a second if you successfully get it compiled. People listening, I don't know. I always, it's so easy. You and I are obviously, we spend so much time in this, and we're lucky because we get to. But for people listening, GraalVM has this native image compilation. It hates fun. So anytime you're doing reflection or proxies or serialization or JNI or whatever, it hates you and hates you for doing that. And you have to account for this by providing JSON configuration files. And these config files are whatever, they're tedious, but they get the job done. They tell GraalVM when you're going to be doing something with reflection or proxies or serialization or JNI or resource loading or whatever. And you could write those by hand, but and so a lot of people, they just package up these JSON config files in their jar. For Spring users, going a step further, there's a dynamic programming model that'll programmatically generate that JSON before it gets fed into the GraalVM native image compiler. So if libraries like Spring Framework for Google Cloud and Spring Boot and whatever, if we've done our job, then hopefully you can just take your existing app and compile it and be done with it and just enjoy, 100 millisecond or less startup times, that kind of thing. That's the hope, but it's not always the case. And I'm just wondering, have you tried it with a reasonably sophisticated Spring Framework for Google Cloud kind of app?
So I have done it. I've tried it in for my own information or for the sake of showing others, but I haven't put that into production yet.
Sure.
So I will say that very clearly. But it definitely it is like you're describing. It takes. So with the Spring Cloud GCP, I haven't had a situation where I've needed to offer more configuration for a Spring Cloud or for a Spring Framework on Google Cloud service. But I have. I'm sure I'll reach one eventually.
Right.
But I have had situations where I have to configure reachability for other stuff or configure reflection. It's not easy, but I have been impressed by how helpful the errors have been from the Graal team.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And also I've been impressed by the public reachability metadata project. Do you know any more about that? Can you explain that maybe?
Well, I suppose I probably just know what you know, which is the Spring team, along with we actually reached out to a bunch of other sort of projects out there because those of us in the framework business are all eager to integrate and support as many different libraries as possible that work with our respective frameworks. But at some point, we're just treading the same water. We're all repeating ourselves. So why should Framework X and Spring both provide configuration for MySQL or whatever, or whatever, right? So the ideal is what I just said, which is you and I, if we have a library, we package it up in meta-inf services, native image, not services, meta-inf native image, native-image / and then you put some JSON files in there, right? Under the group ID and the artifact ID for the folders, and those JSON files get discovered. That's the ideal. That ships with the code itself. So ideally, Postgres ships its own JSON config. Ideally, the logging libraries and all these other things ship their own config. But that doesn't always happen for a number of reasons.
No.
And even if it does happen, not everybody's in a position to upgrade to the latest version where that configuration is probably provided. So the fallback after that is we have this communal effort called the Reachability Metadata Repository, and that is it's under Oracle, github.com/Oracle/ I don't know, GraalVM Reachability Repository or something like that. I forget what the name is, but basically it's just a bunch of, is that right?
That's very close, if not right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that, right? And but basically it's just it's got folders named for the project and then for the version, and so the GraalVM compiler, and Spring Boot does this automatically. It can be configured to consult that repository and pull down the config for artifacts on the class path. And so for a lot of projects, we are working with others to put that configuration out there. We've contributed scores of configuration ourselves, the Spring team has, because we did a lot of that work in Spring Native. And when we got to Spring Boot, we said, okay, the goal here with Spring Boot isn't to take all the stuff we did in Spring Native and just move it over, right? Because then we're in, like no is temporary, yes is forever, right? Like if we put it in our official GA released code, then it stays there. So our goal is to do as little of that as possible, right? We don't want to be in charge of maintaining the GraalVM native driver, right? That's not what we're interested in doing. So,
right. I forget what the name of the rule is, but there's some like software engineering law where it's like if you for every service that you publish, there is some customer who is critically dependent on it as soon as it's out there in GA.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a wise. It's wise to be a little apprehensive.
Right, and especially with something like Spring Boot, there's millions of people with Spring Boot apps out there, so we can't afford to we don't want to be in a position where suddenly we're maintaining I'm just using MySQL as an example, right? But just imagine, right? They can maintain it themselves, or better yet, the community that's got a vested interest in that can maintain it. Whatever. Either way, it shouldn't be us. So while we made it work in Spring Native as a proof of concept, we worked upstream with the various projects for whom we had crafted this configuration, got them to merge it, and if they wouldn't, or they just haven't had the moment or whatever, it got then put in that Oracle GraalVM Reachability Repository. And so, and then we have very little. I don't even know what we've got. We have lots of configuration in Spring itself, in Spring Boot and in Spring Framework, but that's done in terms of our new programmatic SPIs. I don't think we even ship any JSON files anymore, right? Like I think we got completely out of the business. If it's static and it can live in a JSON file, it shouldn't be in our code base. Right?
Oh, okay. I don't know if it's been the JSON or the SPI contributions, but I've been impressed by how quickly that the experience of building native apps and just getting your dependencies to work with it has been improving. I feel like if at the speed that it's increasing now, or the experience is improving now, it'll be in 4 years I'll be talking to developers about how I used to have to configure reachability for my own native image dependencies, and they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Like it'll be like tuning a radio. It'll be like a lost.
It's like I used to manually zip up my jars,
Yeah. But no, I think I actually wrote about that, like how quickly the experience has been improving in a sort of capstone blog post with Dan Dobrin, who's been doing a lot of going out there in the field and helping customers to figure out how to adopt this, or if it's the right optimization for them, really by asking what are you optimizing for, and then taking them down the options of, well, maybe you need this, maybe you just need to make a couple optimizations within Spring, or maybe you really do need the last mile of native image compilation. And it's been a great experience. I think it's been well worth the time, because it's an exciting technology, and now I feel good that the information is out there for how to use it on Google Cloud.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. So and that works well in Cloud Run, which is scaled to 0, right?
It really does. Yeah. It's a great fit there, and especially because a lot of the services are very thin, and they may be used occasionally, but in very spiky kind of usage patterns, where you'll have hundreds come fishing season. You need hundreds of thousands of people need fishing licenses, and then the rest of the year they don't. And so you can have your app respond very quickly, and then stretch back down to 0 when it's not necessary.
Oh wow! So this blog you just linked is on Google Cloud. It's a native image compilation. What's new and what's next? That's what you. Oh, interesting. So this is what you announced. What you did 6 months ago? No, this is early this year. That's just a few months ago.
Yep, just a few months ago. This was kind of a recap of like everything that I've been talking about for the last year, and talking about like what kind of outstanding problems are out there the community is still working on. Touch on reachability, touch on testing, which we did. We just did a session this morning with VMware about how to test and how test containers can be challenging, and that's another thing that maybe we should chat about quickly here.
Sure.
Like testing is not always the same between your JVM app and your natively compiled app.
Right.
I think a good example is like file access, right? That'll be a little bit different between the two. So you want to make sure that things that your integrations, like when your app is communicating with a backend service, that it is still working the same way natively as on the JVM.
Right.
And so one amazing tool to do that is test containers, which is by the Atomic Jar folks. And so I love test containers. I just think it's a great experience being able to just define a container and say, I need this, and build your tests around it. And so I wrote a test container test and then ran it on the JVM, ran it natively. And when I ran it natively, it failed. So there you go. There's an example of it being different between the two. And yeah, it's just another thing to keep in mind when you're looking to migrate a whole service.
Is that because of there needs to be some accommodation to the integration or to the library for test containers, or I don't even know. There's a lot of magic in test containers. It's good magic, great magic, but it is inscrutable controlling Docker, right?
Mm-hmm. You are kind of taking a flying leap, like between, because anything can happen between your app and a container that you're testing against. That's a feature, right? You want to be able to test against whatever you want. So there are a lot of things that could go wrong. I believe in my case, what went wrong was a Spring lifecycle hook that's pulling in Mockito. That I don't think Mockito has full support for native tests yet, and so that's something I'm gonna have to configure around temporarily. But yeah, it's just one of the things you have to find out. And
that's a great point. You mentioned Mockito. They're like Log4j. Does that work? I think that's broken, or there's some weird. Maybe that's fixed, but like there was some issue for a long time. Log4j, GraalVM, native images, like something simple as that, like Log4j, logging in native images. Cannot build.
I think I either remember that issue or I'm thinking of a CVE from Log4j earlier.
Yeah, it's. Let's see. I don't know. I don't even know. There's some. Oh yeah, here's the issue. It doesn't look like it's even assigned. I don't understand. Wow. Yeah, this is an interesting. It's maybe it's not even their fault. It looks like it might be something related to I don't even know. I'm looking at the issue. It looks like there's issues with service loaders or anonymous classes and unsupported JDK features. I don't know. Log4j is doing something, no doubt necessary. I just don't know how to. I don't know what they would have to do to fix it. So
that makes sense.
Wow.
There are a couple of these, small configuration road bumps that aren't obvious, have to be ironed out. But there's a lot of performance that gets unlocked behind it. So I'm sure we'll figure it out, the whole community.
Oh, interesting. So the problem on the, okay, so it looks like 3.0 snapshot for Log4j will work, but only if you compile everything in a single jar with all the Log4j modules.
Oh, that's good to know. That's a good narrowing down fix, but not quite production ready. That's
no, not quite. Yeah. Whatever. My point is, there's definitely some pitfalls and the like. In the Spring, if you're using Spring Boot again, hopefully you'll just naturally steer clear of those. But
yeah,
I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's completely pain free. So I'd be curious to know about some of the pains, if any, that the Google engineering teams had when moving the Spring framework for Google Cloud libraries to Spring Boot 3, and in particular working on the GraalVM support.
Yeah, I wonder. I think a lot of the concerns, a lot of the pain points were very based on like the internal deployment processes at Google, like making sure that the I may just not have all the context. I was kind of there around for the good part where it was working, and here's what we want to tell the users.
Nice.
But it was a large like kind of metadata gathering exercise between our different services. The upside is that we have quite a bit of control over those services, unlike most situations where you're, configuring for other people's dependencies. And so I think it was mostly a uniform problem. Once you get one, a lot of them follow. Yeah. I'll see if I can get a tweet from one of the engineers to weigh in if they have a different opinion.
That's a great point too, by the way. I don't really think at this point there's any unsolvable problems. I think it's just tedious. It's the worst kind of bug. It's not even an interesting one. You just gotta like rinse, repeat, wait, rinse, repeat, wait, rinse, repeat, wait until you just like because you said the errors, like I said earlier, the errors are super informative. They tell you exactly what went wrong, but only once. They only tell you one error.
It is a lot of legwork. Yeah.
It's just the reset and wait time is just it makes me so.
And I think that I'm assuming I'm not a Graal engineer, but I'm assuming that because of the process of the way the app is being built, you can't in Maven you can kind of say like wait until the end and give me all the errors, because you're kind of like all your dependencies are mostly known and you can kind of simulate most of the build and like get a big list of errors. But I think when you're actually building the binary, it has to stop as soon as it finds an error and you have to go sequentially. That's unfortunate, but yeah.
You're right. I wonder if they could do I'm sure they've thought about this, some sort of pre-flight thing, whatever.
And they're smart. They come up with all kinds of stuff. Like I don't know if you saw the one-liner to get and configure your Graal like your JDK instance. The Graal like labs team put that out, I want to say 4 months ago. They had a little blog post, there's a Medium post talking about how they made it easier where you can just curl like GraalVM.com/JDK and you pass in 2 parameters. You pass in the version you want and you pass in the architecture that you're on, and it gives you back the JDK you need. And that's awesome. That's made my demo experience from nothing up my sleeves much easier, because previously my workflow when onboarding somebody or demoing was to get SDK man and then manage my SDK way and GU install native image. No longer necessary. I can just curl the exact one I need and run it, and I'm in business, which I thought was amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah, they're really resourceful. You said you've been doing the native image stuff, and you remember Spring Native, which is the precursor to a lot of the work that landed in Spring Boot 3. What was your first compile time like, and has it gone down considerably since?
My first compile time was, it was on this MacBook, and I think it was around like 11 minutes. And that was pretty variable because it also involved a lot of garbage collection cycles. And I was doing other stuff at the time. But now I think my normal build time with a similarly sized app is somewhere around 8-9 minutes. So it's gone down a bit. Wow. But I'm also doing a lot more of my builds on larger machines. Because I just find it's easier. I don't have to do any cycle. I don't have to do any GC cycles, or and I can keep my computer's resources free to do other stuff while I'm waiting for the test cycles. Yeah, I'm curious if you use the. I've seen a couple. It seems like it's not quite like a fully published feature, but I've seen it written up in some places. The optimization level feature in Graal, where you can say like, I only want some of the native image optimization, so it's faster for the purposes of testing. I want to. Do you use that in your like development inner loop normally? Okay,
so just like with you and CRaC, I tried it and I didn't shave any time. It just, I don't know. I suppose I must have done something wrong when they announced it like a year ago or whatever it was, very very recently. I tried. Believe me, I tried. I wanted that to like save me some pain, but a couple things. First of all, I'm on an Apple M1 now.
Okay.
And the experience has gone from my Intel x86 when I first started doing Spring Native builds back in 2020 to 2021 M1. And plus that combined with all the leaps forward that Spring has taken and the incredible leaps forward that the GraalVM project has taken, all those things now mean that same very, very basic, just barely working build that I would have done in 2020, in March of 2020, where famously nothing else happened.
Yep.
Yeah. Freaking nightmare. And then that same build that I did back then that took about 10 minutes, 11 minutes is now less than a minute, right?
Wow.
Every day I do it on stage. I can, I'm not, it doesn't take anything at all to do a basic web app with actuator, embedded database, web server,
I wonder how much of that is the M1, because I'm on Intel, Mac on Intel, and I've noticed a bit of a speed up, but wow, that is dramatic. That and I've also had like a reasonable increase from the optimization levels. I wonder. I would love to talk to somebody at Graal and see how much of that is architecture specific.
Did you see they announced support for RISC-V the other week or month or whatever, a few months ago?
No.
But then they kind of buried the lead, which was the work they did to move or to support RISC-V architecture in GraalVM. They said could potentially, possibly, big freaking asterisk of disclaimer, pave the way for WebAssembly.
Right? Oh, that is exciting. That is burying the lead. Yeah.
It was at the very bottom of the blog. I'm like, hey, like that would be the thing I would lead with. I don't care about RISC-V. I don't even know anybody using it. But I
don't either. But I've been tinkering with WebAssembly since 2016 or so. I really can't remember, but I thought it was super cool. And I'd love to see it get wide adoption. I've seen some crazy things that it's enabled, and actually some of the first developer advocate at Google content that I saw, I believe, was Jake Archibald doing a WebAssembly demo at I/O several years ago. Super cool. They were speeding up a hot path for image processing, and I was like, wow, what a great role to have, where you just get to like focus in on a feature or a specific developer tool and make a story about it and then go tell people about it. And now I'm here. So feel very lucky about that. And now I get to share this excitement with you. It's been great.
It's good for all of us. I am super glad you're here. I don't even know where are there any things that we should definitely tell the audience before we wind down? Or anything I've missed? I mean, it's just been such a cool conversation. And I didn't have any particular destination in mind. So it's just been fun. But was there anything you wanted to make sure we plugged before we sign off?
No, it has been fun. I think I've plugged about as much stuff as I can without getting embarrassed. I've passed around to several of my blogs, plugged some of my colleagues' work. We've talked about the two recent announcements of Spring Framework on Google Cloud, and we talked about the native image testing content that we just announced this morning. One more thing I'll say is that if you're interested in testing on natively compiled projects, you should check out the Piccadilly Code Lab, which is what I demoed earlier, and it's a bigger than Hello World example of a natively compiled app that it's deployed on Cloud Run. It uses EventArc for EventArc and PubSub for managing state between the microservices. It also uses Cloud Vision API to take an image and classify it and say, is this a safe image? Give it some labels, store the image in File Store, and then store the metadata in Firestore, or in storage in Firestore, respectively. And so I do have a link to that. And so what the contribution that we made to that was Dan and I added a module to, or we made a contribution to add test containers to it, and an eventually working natively compiled test container test. So I feel like that's one more gap.
I'll paste it in the chat and put it on the screen before we sign off, so it's included in the video. That is really great. I mean, I hope people will, while you're looking for that, I'm hoping people will realize that Google is not playing around. They've come to party here. They've got not just modern support for all the different Google Cloud infrastructure services in Spring, but they've also got it like upgraded to Spring Boot 3.0, which again, very, very new, and they're supporting Java 17, and they've got tons and tons of content here. I just sent you your same message back to you, buddy. Don't.
That's okay.
It's like, yeah, I'm super impressed by everything that you've talked about in today, and I didn't realize it was already that far along. And it's just cool that you're got GraalVM native images top of mind, and you're thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah, I can't even come close to taking credit for it, but it's been amazing working with the teams that are doing it and getting out here and just kind of talking about how cool it is. And absolutely any feedback you have about this, about any of the blog posts, the code labs, the podcast, anything. If you just want to chat about Java on Google Cloud, I'm available on Twitter. I'll be on the Google Cloud Discord as well. Reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, anywhere you can reach me.
I was going to say, is that so? Normally at this time, I ask people if there's any, if you're on the internet and if you want to be found, and if so, where do you find them? Where do they find you? And you were smart enough to put your Twitter handle here on the video, but for the people in the podcast, where do they find you?
Yeah, so Twitter, it's Aaron MW, Aaron AARON MDUBYA, and it's the same handle for LinkedIn. And then I am Mukamik on GitHub. I can so put that in the chat as well.
Yep, I'll do that. No problem. I'll try not to send you back your own link this time.
I appreciate it.
Okay, hold on. Grabbing that. Going to the comments. Pasting. Entering.
You can also find me on the Google Cloud blog and the Google Cloud YouTube channel.
That's so cool. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you. It's been amazing. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's been great meeting you. This has been a lot of fun.
To everybody else, thank you as well. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
See ya.